All set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We'll call the Town Hall Renovations Project Building Committee to order. Mr. Barron, would you kindly take the roll, please? Mr. Barron,
Can you hear me?
would you please take the roll?
Go ahead, Jeff. No, now you're muted again.
Councilor Badraco,
Here.
Councilor Minor,
Here.
Mr. Claffey,
Here.
Mr. Mortensen,
Here.
Mr. Murtha. Mr. Murtha,
Here. He's muted.
Go ahead, Ed.
Mr. Murtha,
I'm here.
Mr. Woods,
Here.
Mr. Harpy,
Here.
you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes. Ed Murtha.
Is there a second?
Second, Chris Minor.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Public participation. Any member of the public wishing to speak?
We do have one individual so far has raised her hand, Ms. Mazzacoli. I'll unmute her and get her to speak.
Okay, great.
Hello.
Name and address for the record.
Hi, this is Sue Mazzacoli, 149 Harris Drive, Newington, Connecticut. Tonight I'm calling because I recently went by the new town hall, took pictures of Mazzacoli Way and sent it off to my children. And so on behalf of my children, we want to say thank you so much for preserving Mazzacoli Way. We couldn't be more pleased. We still see the sign. We still see, I know it's not an official road, but we still see a road, even with handicap parking. So I just want to say thank you. I know you all have worked so hard on this town hall. I know it's taken so many different members that have come and gone, chairmen come and gone, lots and lots of problems along the way. And of course, lawsuits and complaints. So I just want to say thank you so much. And I appreciate everything you all have done. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in, Sue.
It's our pleasure.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak?
Looks like none at this time, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Project update, Downs.
Thanks, Joe. This is Frank Tomczyk with Downs. Good evening, everybody. We'll run through the financial summary like we normally do. We'll start with the GMP and what's been approved to date in terms of contract changes. We are up to $912,709.55. That's based on our last committee meeting held back in June. That brings our total GMP value to $28,673,698.55. Pending and approximate changes that we have right now within the budget, that totals $49,140. That would bring our total anticipated GMP value if everything was approved and we drew a line in the sand today to $28,722,000.
We're getting like an interference noise, someone's background. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay. Moving on to the CM contingency, we started with 831,809 from the last committee meeting. Total amount of approved COPs against CM contingency is $487,260.62. Right now, it's carved out in pending against the CM contingency is $55,915. even. That leaves us with $288,633.38 in the CM contingency, if all the pendings are approved. Within the owner's contingency, we started with $868,405. We recently reconciled with the town in consulting with Jeff Barron. He has brought to our attention that there was some testing through tri-state testing that the town is contracted directly with. There's some special testing and air leakage testing costs that have gone against the owner's contingency to the tune of $39,000. That is now factored into the amount of approved changes against the owner's contingency, which is now $775,152.12. The amount of pending changes that I'm planning to present this evening totals $21,292.80. The amount of changes that we're working on behind the scenes, vetting with subcontractors or vetting with the design team, totals $27,847.50. Factoring the pending and approximate against the owner's contingency and what's already been approved, leaves us with $4,112.
You're breaking up a little, Frank.
I think there's other people on the line with some background noise
Okay.
going on here.
Could everyone, whatever's going on, please clear their systems up? Thank you very much. Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, owner soft costs, as I've mentioned throughout all of the committee meetings, we have not been tracking the soft costs other than the starting point was $1,706,810. Out of the CIP funds, we had approved COP 154. That was to take care of the fiber loop in a total of 3 different phases. That totals $176,556.88. When you factor everything in above, brings the total project budget to $30,473,760. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions or downs on that? Okay, Frank.
Okay. We'll move right into the schedule update. A lot has happened, as you guys know, from the last committee meeting. Just want to say that we were able to get everybody into the building successfully on time. I want to say under budget. To give you a recap on how we fared with the final walkthroughs, we did really well. We were able to get the elevator certified on Wednesday of last week. The certificate of occupancy, we received that on Wednesday last week as well, including the certificate of substantial completion. We managed to work through the balance of the flooring within the community center on time, the balance of the accessories that we owed in terms of the project, the things like the signage, the fire extinguisher cabinets, some of the other miscellaneous accessories throughout the building. We obviously got through the systems testing. As of Wednesday last week, we cleared all of the inspectors' issues. So we got through fire alarm system testing, pressure testing within the vault, emergency light testing, things of that nature. In terms of site improvements, we got through all the final paving as it relates to Mazzicoli Way. It's nice to hear members of the Mazzicoli family are pleased with the way things turned out. We're happy to preserve that in the family's honor. We obviously have all the line striping done, and site furnishings are completed as well. As far as stuff that's still in progress, we are wrapping up the final taping along the underside of each canopy on the outside of the community center. That's wrapping up this week. We plan to send the painter around starting next week to finish painting the underside of those canopies. The TCO that we did receive last week excludes the gymnasium and the Parks and Rec kitchen. So we are wrapping up some work in the Parks and Rec kitchen. At this point, we did have to relocate one hand sink based on the health department's final review of the space. We completed the new plumbing work. We had it inspected. We're now buttoning up the wall and putting final finishes back. So we hope to turn that around in the next couple weeks and get a final sign off there. We are currently working in the gym, getting all of the overhead wiring done that's related to the gym equipment, gymnasium lighting. We have about one row of light fixtures currently installed. So we'll continue with that effort over the next couple of weeks. Balance of change order work. So we are diligently working on what's left in terms of change order work that's been previously approved. And I'll give you an example. We have some mailroom cabinets that we approved as part of a contract change. We now have those cabinets and we plan to start the installation this week. Punch list, we're diligently working through the punch list as well. Quisenberry has pretty much worked their way through the entire building and has been giving us punch list items as we receive them. We've been assigning them to the responsible subcontractors, and we're working through the list through its completion. We started with roughly 800 to 900 items. I know that more than half of those items are now complete, and we're down to some, odds and ends, I'll call them, really specific to just painting touch-up and replacement of damaged ceiling tile. That files a good portion of what's left on the punch list. As far as work on the horizon, just kind of looking over the next, 3 to 4 weeks roughly, we're wrapping up exterior signage. What we plan to do is put up the exterior sign to the town hall on the east side of the building this week. The end of this week might leak into Monday, but we're going to hold off on the exterior signage on the west side only because at this point in time, that's going to be an egress only, and we're going to have protection up that's going to separate phase 1 from phase 2. So we're going to hold off until we get further along with demo and we're able to take scaffolding down along that side. It just makes more sense to do it that way. Within stairwell number 2, we are still waiting for rubber material that will finish the flooring in the stairwell number 2. Right now, you just have bare concrete. That material is supposed to ship out of Cranston, Rhode Island by tomorrow. So we are planning to confirm that. Hopefully that is still the case. That was an update given to us this week that it was still shipping the 23rd. The panel partitions, the ship dates have not changed from the last update that I gave you all back in June. The panel partitions for the town hall are still planning to ship the week of August 17th. The floor finishing within the gym obviously is dependent on us getting electricians out of there, getting the overhead wiring completed. So we are hopeful to get that wiring done over the next couple weeks. So in August, we are planning to go right into sanding of the wood floor, the piping, and then the final seal coating of the floor. So we can take delivery of the bleachers. The bleachers right now are sitting at the factory in Michigan. So we're just waiting to pull the trigger. We may pull the bleachers in ahead of time. If we have to store them somewhere on site strategically, we'll do that. So we're not waiting around for bleachers to show up after the floor is completed. And then phase 2, with people now moving out of the building, the balance of the occupants will move out tomorrow. Probably some odds and ends by the end of the week, but come Monday, the 27th, we'll go right into phase 2. We have all of our approvals to start abatement. And so we'll start the prep work for the containments to get going on abatement throughout the building. We'll probably start at the auditorium first and kind of work our way south. We're still working through a final sequence so that we can give you a detailed schedule come the next committee meeting. Other critical items, the balance of phase 1 expediting, we've pretty much gone through that. expediting. We may consider some expediting in the gym because we know that's important to turn over as soon as possible. And then the post move-in work, I kind of touched on already. The stair 2 for 1 comes to mind. I mentioned that we should be seeing that material very shortly to complete that. The panel partitions was really what we considered the post move-in work, and keeping an eye on those deliveries, making sure we don't slip any more, and looking at the potential to expedite that if we can in any way. If nobody has any questions, we can go right into the change orders that I'm planning to present this evening.
Are there any questions of Frank? Go ahead, Frank.
Okay. So the COPs that we're planning to present this evening have been outlined, starting with COP 228. That is to provide additional support for, there's a total of 8 wood canopies. This is in the Grand Hall. So you've got canopies of various lengths that we need to provide additional support. They were originally just cantilevered. The consensus was to add support cables at the ends of these canopies so that we have adequate support throughout that space. That total cost is $2,360. COP 230, that is a feeder repair that we did. Some of you may have been part of the council meeting where this came up, and we made a decision to make an emergency repair to not lose time off the schedule for one, and for number 2, try to keep the cost down as much as possible. So we recognize that this is a sensitive issue for certain people within the town hall, and it's easily understandable why. We certainly don't want to take over a space that could be used for some other purpose by anybody. So we're working with the electrician now to relocate that junction cover and wiring to the floor below. We think there's a way we can do it so that we can restore the plywood that's in this particular room. And there would be a minor cost adjustment of roughly $1,000 that would be part of CM contingency, and still pale in comparison to the cost we would have incurred had we pulled out all of the wiring and ran new wiring, which would have caused a big hardship to a lot of other trades that needed to finish off the project. COP 245, that was to expedite, again, to make sure we stayed on track with the schedule to finish up odds and ends associated with millwork and wiring within the community center. That's a CM contingency item, no increase to the GMP. 247 is a give back to the town. As we work through the Board of Education space, we made a decision to change the wall base from a 6-inch to a 4-inch. So you're getting a material credit there. The labor is the same, almost $800. COP 250, again, more expediting, getting ready for fire alarm. It was critical that we work this Saturday in COP 250 to get the fire alarm where we needed to start pre-testing that system. That's another contingency item. COP 254 is to get power to a unit heater. That's on the first floor in the main water room. There was no power originally specified. This is to extend conduit and wiring approximately 90 feet from the power source to the water room for $1,932.33. COP 255, that is to accommodate a security camera and reader within the cab. Basically means that we need a new wiring harness from Schindler Elevator that we need to run to the cab. So the cost associated with that is $5,353. COP 256, that is a request that came from Parks and Rec. Excuse me, that's to add line striping at badminton courts. That's based on 8 badminton courts for $7,198. COP 257 has to do with the conference room on the second floor. We started with a 12-foot whiteboard within this conference room. Because of the AV arrangement in that room, we could not install the 12-foot board. It's essentially the same cost to just get 2 new whiteboards versus cutting the 12-foot board. So the cost to do that, to get 2 new whiteboards, to work around the AV, that's $635. COP 260 was to credit back a wood door that we didn't have to install when we increased the size of the mail room. Because we increased the size, we got rid of a wall, which got rid of a door, so that gets credited back to the town. We got to that in time before we released that particular door into production. So that's a savings of $538.75. 261 is to add metal base for the lockers. If we didn't add it, they would have just sat on the ground. The conventional approach here is to provide a metal Z base. That's what we call it, a Z base for the lockers, for $1,269. 262 has to do with more of a sequencing thing on our end associated with the temporary fence. Because of the binder and the location of the temp fence, the main fence gate, we had to relocate posts in preparation for the binder. So that's a contingency item, no increase to the GMP. We scroll a little bit further down. Okay, 264. So this is in the human services. On the second floor, there's a reception window inside the human services lobby. Right now is a fixed window, and they want the ability that for anybody walking up to that reception area to be able to speak to reception. So it makes sense to put in a what we're calling a speak through, like a little speaker built into the glass. Unfortunately, that's tempered glass. You can't cut into it to put a speak through. You're going to have to provide new tempered glass. So the cost is for the new glass and 2 speak throughs for $1,561.70. And then 272 came out of our final inspections with the local inspector. We were directed to provide egress hardware, crash bars on the doors going into the main switchgear room. That's really just the main cost of the panic device hardware that was needed, and some labor for the install for $2,315.52. And when you add all those together, the total is $21,292.80.
Are there any questions of Frank on those COPs that he just listed?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Anthony Claffey.
Anthony, go ahead, please.
Number 255, the elevator. Is that associated with the change of the elevators from one spec elevator to a secondary type elevator? Or was that missed regardless of what elevator we put in?
I'm not familiar with the other elevator system that was spec'd. I do know that the elevator system that we provided, it basically did not come with, it wasn't spec'd with this type of harness cable.
I can comment on this. That is to support the addition of a camera and a card reader in the elevator.
But where's it? I guess my question is, where's it coming from? What? And I'm just saying, I know we saved some monies when we switched to a more energy or different elevator mid project. I mean, do all elevators now require this, or is there somewhere we can put this money that?
No, a traveling cable is actually an amenity associated with the technology. So if you're adding technology to the cab, a traveling cable is basically a slack cable that rides up and down the shaft and provides all the communication and wiring to this specific equipment. Okay. So if you don't have this equipment in the elevator, you don't need the traveling cable. But when this equipment gets added, the traveling cable gets added.
So who, if anyone knows, on this, in this meeting, asked for this $5,300 addition?
Well, so the camera and the card reader were always part of the original documents. It's
Okay.
the cable that's the missing component to bridge the gap to complete
Okay.
the system, if you will.
So let me ask you something of Collier's. Are you tracking this to figure out where the misstep was? I mean, that's a big item, $5,300.
Mark Schweitzer at Colliers. I am tracking it as an owner request because it was an add because to the function of the building and the elevator.
Mr. Chair, Paul Boutot from the town was on.
Go ahead, please.
All right, so as far as the original plans from the day one on design, going back to previous town manager and the previous director of facilities, there was always on the plans, on the drawings, a card reader as well as a camera in the coach on the plans.
Okay, so
if that's the case, and excuse me for not having that aligned correctly, but if that's the case and the traveling cable wasn't in the elevator, the traveling cable would have had to be added to the scope to support that camera and the card reader. It's unfortunate it wasn't in the spec, but if it was in the spec, we would have paid for it at bid time. It's an asset to the project to support those amenities. It certainly is a cost that results as an asset to the owner. If there's a premium associated with adding it later, that's something that would be discussed obviously at a later date.
Right. Okay, I just don't know when we switched elevators, why all the elevator parts weren't, that's all I'm trying to figure out is where the miscue was, and I'm not saying it's not needed, but if someone just came in and said, hey, I want this, and it kind of flew under the radar until the end of the job, I see that's kind of a hardship on the committee that really doesn't, I think you all understand what I'm getting at.
I think, Joe Harpy, I think what occurred here was that when they went to bid, Schindler was cheaper than the one that we were looking at.
Yeah.
And the specs somehow didn't follow the differential. And then it got picked up when the project was being reviewed by data and other people.
Okay, and then I have two other concerns on COP. One is 254, which is the feed wire.
The $1,932 one?
Yep. Is it something we missed? Is it something that wasn't in scope? Was added at a later date?
Mike, do you want to comment on that, please?
This is similar to the elevator COP. We had a unit heater specified. We did not have the wiring to the unit heater. So we had a unit heater as part of the mechanical set of drawings. We did not have wiring to it.
So that's on the electrician?
No, that is a change to the project.
So you had the heater, but you didn't have the electric. How do they not go hand in hand on a drawing?
Because it was not specified on the drawings. I mean,
That's what so the electrician missed it, or your mechanical guy said, hey, I'll put it in, but I have no power on the drawing. I'll just wait till the end of the trip or the job.
Mechanical guy is not responsible to wire the unit heater. He's responsible to furnish and install the mechanical piece of equipment.
So the electrician doesn't look at the mechanical room and see where he needs to have power? So just trying to get a point of something was missed, but it seems no one wants to take responsibility for it.
Well, no, so at the beginning of this project, I remind everybody when this type of conversation comes up that we are very clear in our GMP when we make clarifications that we are not responsible to coordinate between disciplines. So we've been dealing with some of these electrical changes throughout the project. Very similar situations, and they're all very they're all very similar.
No, I understand, Frank. I kind of seem that who's, it's like the hen, who's watching the hen house? Well, if a drawing's missing something, who's supposed to be reviewing those drawings to see where discrepancies lie between an electrician and a mechanical contractor?
Well, another thing I'll say in Down's defense, and it's been said before, I'll repeat it again. We try to catch everything that is not on the drawings. We did go through 4 addendums at the beginning of this project, but not every single detail can be picked up over the course of those addendums.
I'm not saying it I'm just, it's just odd that at the end of the job, we have 2 COPs that are or 3 COPs. The other one's the metal base for 261, and you're at 5, 6, 7, 8, just shy of $9,000. That's all. I'm not blaming anyone, but I just want to make sure that everyone on the committee is understanding, like, there are some ramifications for missing stuff. It's not just a blank check to the trade, say, oh, you missed it, or we're not going to look into that. That's all.
No, we do, of course, we do vet these changes when they come in, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing we do is check the drawings to make sure there is entitlement for a subcontractor to be, to receive additional compensation. So that's first and foremost. We vet that, and that's why we go through the process before we come to this meeting, and Colliers and Quisenberry review these changes for that specific reason.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
anyone else have a question on those? Frank?
I'm all set.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit out of order here, so that we can keep, well, go ahead with the other ones. Go ahead, the orders of magnitude, that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, so we've got orders of magnitude with what we've outlined here. We've got 28 COPs that we're working on. We've managed to get our hands around basically what we know in terms of changes at this point in time. So starting at the top, I'll try to just go through these really quickly. Some of these are older items that we've been talking about. 34, that's the credit for general trades. We're still waiting until we get through the full extent of the general trade scope to give that back. Extending power to the open offices, that's up on the 3rd floor within the Board of Ed space. There was a little bit of work that had to be done based on the final configuration of the furniture up there. Power to the range hood, again, this is similar to the unit heater, where we have a range hood on the drawings, but there is no power. So we are trying to work with the design team to come up with a solution there. We just need some circuit information and panel location to finalize that. 240, kind of the same thing. Heat trace for the canopy. This is on the east side of the entrance to the town hall. This is to finish wiring for heat trace because we have piping to roof drains that are exposed. There is a concern for freezing. We obviously don't want that to happen, so the heat trace is necessary. 246 has to do with protecting the floor in the gym. Because we went out of sequence because of the COVID-19 issues we face in the gym and the delivery issues it caused, we went out of sequence. We put the floor down to try to salvage some of the time in there. And in doing so, when we go back to do overhead work, we have to protect the floor with 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood. But we are recognizing that as a CM contingency, even though we could probably discuss that as a change in scope. 248 is to deal with control joints around the building at the cast stone locations. We have roughly 150 linear feet of control joint to do. We did start off this change at about 9,000. We have been vetting this behind the scenes with Colliers and Quisenberry, and we've got this down. It's showing 6817, but we're probably right around $5,000 or 5,500 on this total change. This is something that we would like to proceed with ahead of a formal approval. So I asked the committee to take this into consideration, not really knowing when the town hall is going to start accepting the general public. It's something we'd like to do on the outside of the building to just get out of everybody's way. 249 is standby power. That's specific to NCTV. We do need some design information to complete that scope of work. We are working through that right now with the design team. 251 right now is just discussion about signage around the exterior, whether or not we do need additional signage. 252, that's auto operators. That's hardware to automatically operate the doors going into the NCTV suite. Another one we're working with the design team to finalize. 258, we've done a portion of this work already just to get the Parks and Rec kitchen in order for a final review by the health department. 259 is to
Excuse me,
address.
Can I interrupt you 1 second? Would you give a
Sure.
little more background on why we had to do the relocation of the hand sink?
Yeah, so when we brought in the health department to do their final inspection, we were a little surprised because they told us that the current location of the hand sink within that kitchen needed to be closer to the warewash station or a dishwashing station. So to comply with their request and to make sure we pass an inspection, we really have no choice but to relocate that hand sink, even though we tried to, make a case that we were in close proximity to the warewash station. They wanted it closer. So it's not an argument we were going to win. That's what happened.
Keep in mind that the plan for that kitchen was vetted with the health department prior to overall project and construction document approval. So they approved it the way it was laid out, but then when they walked it, they decided they wanted to move that sink.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arcari. Frank?
Sure. The next one's 259. We're going to need some more information on this. We've just carved out a COP, so it's on our radar, but this has to do with the potential for more power needs within the Parks and Rec kitchen to accommodate any existing equipment that the Parks and Rec people may have. So we're going to have to talk a little bit more about that to see what exactly is entailed. We're going to need some more information on the town, from the town to finalize that one. 265 is to provide an access panel to house the main elevator equipment, which is at the 3rd floor level of the building. We gave this a rough order of magnitude of $741. Turns out the cost of the panel is really insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So I'm going to elect to void this out altogether and make it 0. 266 is to deal with the flag poles with the custom bracket setup. If you guys recall, we gave back labor when we were installing based on the original setup. So we credited back roughly $2,000. This is labor we've carved out and set aside to deal with the new installation of the flagpoles based on the custom bracket setup. 267 has to do with the storm cleanup over the 4th of July weekend. We're still compiling the costs. We did discuss the possibility of moving this cost over to an insurance claim, but in talking with the town, my understanding is the deductible is pretty high and doesn't make much sense to go that route. So we are capturing this cost and allocating it towards the CM contingency. 268 is tracking, again, keeping it on our radar to track any additional interior signage. I'll give you one example. To comply with the local building department's request, we were advised to add a not an exit sign at the gate that goes down to the basement in stairwell number 2. So that would be one example. We have a few other cases or instances similar to that, and we're tracking that under COP 268. 270 came out of the inspections again on the 3rd floor because all of the main equipment is housed at the 3rd level To meet elevator inspection requirements, we need to add a fire extinguisher at the 3rd floor. So we went ahead and did that. Otherwise, could have potentially compromised receipt of the elevator certificate from the state. 271 is coordination with furniture within the building department suite. There was adjustment to relocate 3 poke-through devices within the suite to accommodate the furniture layout. 273 is to add a countertop within human services. That was something that came through as an end user request. My understanding is there is no type of setup like that. I'm not sure if there was an earlier version of the plan that had some level of FF&E there to take care of that. But the request came to us to add a countertop, a piece of finished woodwork. Okay, power in the mail room. So this is up on the 2nd floor in the main mail room. This is to add wire mold in specific locations. We need to review this with the design team to see if this is truly necessary. There may be enough power in there. We need to take a closer look at that one, but we're keeping it on the radar for now. 275 is to deal with some chief boxes, which are boxes to accommodate AV components that are no longer required. There's 3 locations within the council chambers. And my understanding is based upon their locations, they don't need to be utilized. So the solution there is to add a cover at each box and wrap it with wall covering that matches the existing wall covering. 276 is to get power to access control at various door locations. That work was completed to not create any issues with move-in. 277 is to deal with damaged ceiling tile. I'm sorry, that's to deal with damaged walls at specific locations throughout the building. That's a CM contingency item. 278 is an internal change. That was a back charge between our subcontractors. 279 is to add another layer of protection to the building between phase 1 and phase 2. We've got the temporary fence in place now. This would be to add basically a walkway, scaffolded walkway that will protect anybody coming out or anybody that travels down that bituminous path that's between the new building and old building. That would also be a contingency item. 280 is to take care of some damaged hardware that came at the end of the project. That's going towards our CM contingency. 281 was a request from the local inspector to add exit push bars for stair 1 to meet their requirements. And 282 and 83 is just to expedite the final push of the project to finish up hardware and wiring and cleanup over this past couple Saturdays. Both of these COPs going towards CM contingency. And when you add up the approximate cost of all the COPs above, you get to $27,847.50.
Any questions of Frank on those items? You'll see them again, so if you have one, you might want to save it for next time. Okay, Frank.
Okay, really nothing to report under rejected COPs. All of these items are pretty much old news. And under requisitions, just know that we've processed the June rec, working on the pencil rec for July. But based on the June rec, we have roughly 6.6 million to finish. That does include retainage, which is right now at roughly $1 million.
Do you have any photos you want to share? Or we've looked at it.
I mean, a lot of you had toured the space.
We all had the tour, so
yeah,
I think we all have a good sense of that. I would like the committee's indulgence to adjust the agenda so that we can maintain continuity and move the generator to Roman numeral 8, move to consider to take action on change order request to 6 rather, and 7 to consider to take action on fund transfers. So with that, I would entertain a motion on the change orders presented and discussed for $21,292.80. Can I get a motion to that effect, please?
Make a motion, Joe, to, Mr. Chair, to approve the change orders as presented.
Okay, is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, it's passed unanimously. And continuing with the adjusted agenda item.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on, I think Frank had also requested a verbal approval for one additional item before formal approval. And that would be
COP
248.
I'm sorry, you broke up. Which number is that, please?
Work associated with COP 248. The price is going down, but he was looking for authorization to go ahead and do that work in advance of formal approval.
Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, Frank, is that something that we were able to get some manufacturer assistance with in terms of overall end cost to deal with this issue?
Yeah, the manufacturer's assistance is actually built into the change already. So there is some cost in there, and it is offset by the manufacturer's rep.
Okay. And have they accepted any additional responsibility if we continue to have these issues with the same type of concerns moving forward on the warranty period?
That's a great question.
Because that would just be something I'd want to make sure that they have identified this is a current issue, post-construction right away, they showed, and I just don't want to go down the road and, have a similar situation where we try to talk to them again and have them turn their back on it. So that would be my only reluctance to agreeing with anything. It needs to be done, but let's get their commitment to sticking with this.
Well, the bone of contention with the manufacturer's rep is that the control joint should have always been there. It wasn't their responsibility to install them because they weren't originally specified. The give back that they have put in their proposal is really there because there were some quality concerns that we had over the course of the project that had nothing to do with the cracking. It was more of some of the aesthetics of the panels when they came into us. We ended up kicking back quite a few panels before we put them up. So it was the hassle, if you will, of dealing with that they felt it necessary to give back some money to help with this work.
Okay. But they did not have a specification in terms of control joint locations. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Yeah, which to me that's a manufacturer's issue. Okay. Thank you.
I think what I would like to do is give the committee the evening to think this over. And I'll get a consensus tomorrow from the committee and I'll call Frank.
Chairman, Councilor Buteyko has her hand raised.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that the reason we want to push this forward is for safety reasons, because the work is that what you?
It's not. No, it's not a structural or a safety issue. It's just it's just work that's on the outside of the building that we have masons available to do the work now. So it seems like a great opportunity. before the general public starts to shuffle through the building. It's just work we could do and be out of the way. That's all.
Okay, no, okay, that's great. Yeah, I didn't think it was a structural issue, but just having the public coming in and out while you're doing the work could be problematic. Okay, thank you.
Well, all the more reason we'd like to do it now before the public
Okay,
gets
well,
allowed.
you'll have your answer tomorrow. You'll have
Thanks.
your answer tomorrow.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay, where are we with the motion on the table for 21,292,80? We approved that already?
Yes, that passed 7-0.
Good. And then in the adjusted agenda, we'll go to consider to take action on fund transfers. Mr. Barron.
Yes, I'm looking for a motion from the committee to move to transfer $21,292.80 from owner's contingency, which is account number 31110-9912, to the construction line item account number 31110-9911. And this will
There a
pay for the
motion,
change orders that you just approved.
Can I have a motion to that effect, please? Mr. Mortensen? Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
So approved. Okay, done and done.
Thank you.
All right, we're next going to go to the generator discussion. There's been a lot of discussion and various opinions on the generator and some clarification that we've been seeking from the town side in terms of answers to questions that have been put forth a number of months ago. So, Mr. Arcuri, would you care to address that, sir?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of questions about the generator, the design process of the generator, the capacity of the generator. I've asked Graham Curtis from DTC to come tonight to talk about their design process, the generator itself, what loads are on the generator, and essentially create a forum to ask some of the questions or try and answer some of the questions that have been outstanding there about the generator. So with that, I'll turn it over to Graham. Graham, if you'd give a little summary as to how you approach the process, and then we can take some questions.
Go ahead.
Great. Yep. Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Joe, for inviting me to the meeting to clear this up. I know there's been a lot of questions, so hopefully I can summarize this fairly succinctly. I think I sent you some, Joe, I think I sent through Tom, yeah, some information. Yeah, let me just start off with a little background. And so first of all, I actually was working on this job for over 5 years. I know some people have been working on it for a lot longer than that. And it's glad to see us getting near the end. So basically during schematic design, probably in 2018, we had discussions with the previous facility director, Dave Langan, about the parameters of what to put on the generator. The concept was basically for freeze protection, emergency lights, technology, the elevator, other life safety, and 50 miscellaneous outlets throughout the building. At that time, there was no plans to have the building fully operational on an emergency generator. And as most people would recall, there was quite a few budget constraints on the project. So we were looking to reduce as much as possible cost rather than add cost. As the design progressed, the basic concept remained the same, but some of the assumptions and some of the loads were increased to the design. But the intent was to make it as more freeze protection and emergency than a fully operational building. A second question has come up is exactly what's on the generator and why is it so large? So this sheet here you see in front of you lists the 12 things, basic categories of items that are on the generator. And over on the right-hand side is the wattage that's associated with that. So if you add up the emergency lighting is 15 kW, so on and so forth. I won't read them all. But the most significant thing is that the VRF heat pump system in freeze protection mode is 415 kW, which is almost 2/3 of the total load. Now, let me just explain that. So the VRF heat pumps, which are very efficient and we're responsible for the community getting a sizable rebate from Eversource, I think in the order of $200,000. They are very efficient. They have the ability to move refrigerant and heat around the building, but in a very low cold temperature, they basically are electric heat. So when it gets down to a very low temperature, it's mostly electric. So that's 415 kW. So that's why the generator is so large. So even with just that alone, you still need a 400 kW. And then there is quite a bit of technology and IT equipment, in this building, and we've included that. That was a little more higher than we originally anticipated in schematic design, but we coordinated that. So there's a lot of that in the building. So if you look at the math, the total adds up to 647, which is actually greater than the 600 size. So you would question, how can that be? Well, the National Electric Code allows you to reduce the total load reduce the generator size based on the assumption that not all these things are going to work simultaneously. So there's a diversity of load, so it allows you to reduce that load significantly or proportionally to that. So currently, if you do that calculation by code, you're somewhere, you're under 600, but you're in that range. So the question came up: could we add more things to the generator? Well, the calculations are somewhat conservative, and the actual load, because you're not going to be loading up all these receptacles, not going to be running the the air conditioning units and the heat pump. It's a very variable load, because it could, you'll unlikely see that, but they move the heat around. So it's not an exact science. They only see that load on a very cold day. And once you start up the load, there's initial startup, but after you're running, the loads comes down. So you have more capacity. So what I'm, to verify that, so now that the building is getting close to operational, I've asked Eversource to provide us with the actual meters. And there's 3 different meters, and we can model the building and see what kind of electrical load we're actually seeing, and look at the possibility of adding more things onto the generator. I will note that the most of the air conditioning, which is VRF heat pumps, it's the load is generated by the heat, but there's actually the air conditioning load would actually be proportionally less, because it requires less energy for cooling and heating in the worst case scenario. So there may be capacity for the air conditioning inside the VRF heat pump number, but I want to operate the building a little bit and see how it goes, and see what capacity we have. There was some confusion recently about the load test and what the capacity was. It wasn't a limitation on the generator. It was a limitation on the ability to put to test the generator thoroughly, because there was not much load. It was not a hot day, and there wasn't much air conditioning and much running, and the contractor didn't have a large enough load bank to really put this thing through its paces. But there was no problem more than adequately sized to handle the life safety loads for the building. So basically, that's that kind of summarizes where we are, and I'm expecting to get some. The Eversource reads the meters at the 15th day of the month, and I'm hoping to get the results shortly for the month period ending July 15th, because we did have some very high days, and I'll see what the actual AC loads we're anticipating. We'll know better when we move into the building what the actual loads are as we operate. But traditionally, the calculated values are conservative, and the reality is you see quite a bit less load. But the code, mandates certain criteria. But I'm expecting that the actual load in use will be less once we get the building fine-tuned operationally.
Okay, Mr. Minor has raised his hand with a question. Mr. Minor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Graham, just to confirm that the cooling side of the system is 100% on the generator in terms of load?
Well, the heat pumps are on. I mean, the heat pumps, which covers most of the building, are on the generator. I think the controls currently have them not going on to it yet, but that's a change we could make, because the equipment is wired up.
Right. So the ability to have the cooling on the generator is not currently on there. So, equally concerning is freeze protection, but with the IT equipment in the building and everything else, obviously not having a superheated building is also a concern. So is that something that can be added on, or is there any component of it on there currently?
I believe the heat pumps are wired, but it's just a controls thing that they don't go on it. But that's something we have to work out.
All right,
But I mean, the
theoretically,
IT, all the IT,
theoretically,
yeah, theoretically, the IT, obviously, there's a lot of cooling for the IT rooms, in the base that's already on the system.
okay. But
Did
as
you see
far
the
as the
list?
general cooling controls for the remainder of the building are not currently, correct?
Not currently, correct.
All right, but potentially could be added on without being a complete catastrophe in terms of having redistribution and new transfers. It's just a matter of system wiring, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to work that out with Downs, but yeah, so I mean, the equipment is wired.
Okay.
James, I'm gonna need your assistance. Three participants have raised their hands, but I'm not picking up who they are.
Currently, you have Councilor Minor, Commissioner Claffey, and then Mr. Boutot as well.
Mr. Claffey, please.
Thank you. I just want to talk and make sure that from the beginning, the generator's not there to run the whole building. It's there in the case of emergencies and to run, maybe a few little more maybe items than 1 through 12 that's listed by the electrical engineer. But I just want to be clear, like, did we get midstream and someone wanted the whole building to run on generator power? It's not a norm to do this. Yes, it's normal to have, it'd be great to have an 87% capacity generator, but can anyone say that the town people wanted this whole building to run on a generator? Because that's what it sounds like now, where we didn't go into this project wanting the whole building on generator power, and it's not a norm in construction to have a whole building under generator power. It's there for emergencies, hurricanes, winter storms, ice storms, etc. Any thought?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Claffey. We're going to come back to you on that. Mr. Boutot.
Yes, I'd just like to ask Mr. Curtis Graham, as far as he mentioned during his design phase of this, where he said that the IT rooms were part of the base. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so when we reviewed the building, when we went to go look at the plans, none of the IT rooms were actually in the base. We actually had to have them added to the generator panels at a cost, a significant cost to the town. So they weren't included in the base.
Curtis, do you have any comment on that?
I'd have to look at that. That's what, these calculations show. How it transpired, I don't know. I know there was quite a bit of growth in the amount of power for the IT equipment.
Because when we sat with your team, I've been here since we did the initial design aspect, and we were asked, as far as in most buildings, your IT telecommunications rooms are on generator power. You guys took notes, basically identified that was going to be included. However, at the beginning of the project, that's when we identified that all the outlets within the telecommunications rooms weren't on emergency generators. And then we found out that the power serving the equipment racks was not on the emergency generators. That was all added through ASIs in order to add that within those locations. And we're still going through that right now with NCTV. And again, the town gets charged every time that comes our way. When you refer to the vendor coming out and doing the test on the generator, on the day that they did the test, I was outside there with them. They basically said that when they hooked the generator up to the town, we only had a 20 amp load on that particular generator, and that he had to put 740 amps of load on that particular generator in order to put it under load.
Graham, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah. I mean, the load, there wasn't much load. The emergency load is very minimal in the building, so it's a very efficient building. So I don't disagree. There was only probably 20 amps on the emergency circuits. That's why I had to bring a large load bank to test it out. It is a big generator, obviously.
Paul, can you make comment on Mr. Claffey's inquiry about, was there a desire on the town historically, going back to the previous facilities manager to, well, for example, have greater parts of the building lit rather than 25%? Do you recall if there's anything like that, or?
Again, at that particular time of the project, I had limited involvement, but I'll just go by what I do know.
Okay.
That the initial part of the project was going to start out. I believe there was another gentleman, Steve Jandro, that worked for Graham Curtis's company before he left. And then there was discussion between Mr. Langdon and Steve Jandro at that time about having the building be powered under emergency generator in order to function during emergency operations, run regular town business. At what point that deviated from that particular sizing to where the building would be 100% under generator power, I do not know where that change came from. I wasn't involved in the project at that time. All I looked at is the interest of the town when I did get involved to try to determine that we were getting what we were paying for. And that the design aspects included life safety areas. When we identified areas that may have refrigeration, we looked at whether emergency generator power was there so we wouldn't have spoilage in human services, for an example. So we identified those locations that had refrigerators did not call for emergency generator. So we would have lost all food or perishables in those particular locations for human services. We have certain life safety areas or code requirements for, say, the town clerk's office or the vault in that particular location because of humidification and records. Though some of those areas there require some type of circulation in order to keep those records compliant with record, the state of Connecticut records as far as they have standards on how records are supposed to be maintained as far as so they don't get damaged. So I'm not sure, again, on where those changes or where those things were pulled out.
Okay, so to go to Mr. Claffey's inquiry, again, how would you view the status of what's on there now versus what would be a preference on the town side to add if possible?
Well, I take a look at it again, as far as if you want to say whether the whole building's on or whether you're able to conduct business, I think they're two different things.
Right.
If you had an emergency event right now, what has been adjusted so far on the project is the data rooms have been put on the system where they weren't originally. We have some offices that had emergency outlets, but we do have major parts of the building where, at a minimum, you would think that you would have emergency outlets, say, at least a set or a series of them within each department. So maybe you go over and say, all right, at a public counter within, say, the tax collector's office, and then maybe a secretarial position or an administrator position. So that way, even with minimum staffing, you can maintain operations. Some areas where you might want to function within, say, conference rooms, where you could actually place people in a conference area and then have them work with laptops or things of that nature. So I think you could strategically place outlets throughout the building to accomplish functionality as far as maintaining operations, being able to staff the building during emergency. And then hopefully, moving forward, we can find that type of capacity to add to.
Graham, does that work under the scenario you were laying out where the 2 meters would be there? I believe you said by Eversource. And then,
Yeah, we'll see ideally we'll see what you're using. Actually it's 3 meters, every part of the building's metered separately. So we'll have a better feel. It's a matter of adding receptacles. I think we originally had 50 receptacles scattered to the building. I think we're up to like 118 now. So I'm sure we could add more. It's just the math doesn't work now. That's the problem. But in reality, I think it's very likely that we will have capacity. And there's always ways to adjust, with controls, but what you actually put on the generator, operationally.
So what type of a time frame would you think, based on your experience with these things, that we'd be looking at to come up with either some sort of trade-off or addition to the areas that Paul just...
Well, hopefully by next month, once by August 15th, you'll be in the building. using it and it'll be under load, we'll have a pretty good feel for how much power you're actually using compared to theoretical capacity.
I think the real challenge, though, is in regards to the VRF heat pumps. So the VRF heat pump load in sort of max heating scenarios is what really taxes the size of this generator. It uses up, in theory, about 2/3 of the capacity.
Yeah.
So outside of being in the heat mode, we're always going to show a significant amount of capacity. I think ideally the best scenario would be to get, into the heart of the winter, do a second evaluation and identify, what is the actual usage for the most part on most days aside from peak days, and then establish how much could we really push the capacity of that generator.
So to go to Paul's point, there are two silos here. One is the business side, which is the operation of the building and its departments to live with certain limitations, at least presently, on the generator. And the other side is, as Anthony pointed out, is what most people think of the function of a generator of this type and design. Not saying either one is 100% wrong or right, but there's certainly room for some, I think there's some room for some negotiation in terms of how we can plot this, the more history we can get on the situation. As to the 25% of the full lighting system, was that plugged in as like an average, an industry average, or how did we get to that? Is that just kind of a standard?
Yeah, to facilitate evacuation of the building. I mean, most people use task lighting or on computers. They don't even want a lot of ceiling lighting anyway. So I think you could work around that pretty readily.
In the sense, when you say work around it, to add to it?
Or just, I don't know how serious, a deficiency, if you had 25% of lighting and you had, the task lighting, you could.
So you're saying, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm just saying it's fairly standard just to more evacuate the building. I don't know operationally how that would work. During the day, it'd probably be fine.
All right, so, but if the town felt that it wanted to explore a plug-in of additional situation for the business side, the assessor's office or whatever.
Yeah, the light load with modern lights, with LED lights, the light load, if you look on the list, it's only 15 kW. So it's a relatively modest. So even, it would only be theoretically 45 additional.
Okay.
Worst case. And if you did a half of the building, maybe, it would be 15 additional.
Paul, did you have any comment on that?
I don't have anything to add on that, Joe. I think that's something that, the town will have to take a look at. Either way, there would be a cost associated with taking an area that you want to convert over to standby panels, right? You're looking at rerouting feeder cables from those panels back over to the main electrical room on the first floor, and then actually tying that into the transfer switches in order to put them on standby power. So there definitely would be expense involved with that.
Right. Well,
can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
This is Frank from Downs.
Hey, Frank.
And I'm not an electrical engineer by any stretch, and I don't even play one on TV, but let me just ask Graham a question. The power to the generator is three-phase power, correct? So you have roughly 850 amps per leg, which is roughly 2,500 amps. The most the building will draw, and correct me if I'm wrong, is roughly 150 amps per leg, which would be 450 amps. So if my math is somewhat accurate, that's only what, 17 to 18% of the capacity of the generator? Or am I oversimplifying this whole thing?
Yeah, I think you're oversimplifying with the voltages and stuff like that. My electrical guy would if you shoot me an email, I'll get a more exacting answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what the town is saying, not putting words in Paul's mouth, is that they believe that this for what they're considering for future use and for current use is how much this load mimics the original energy source in that building? How many things can mimic it to the satisfaction of the town and on the business side? We can argue and disagree on this, but it's obviously important to the town or they wouldn't keep bringing it up. And I think what we got to do, I would ask you to continue this kind of form of cooperation, if I might, Graham, with you involved, if you have time and whatever.
Yeah, sure. It's always interesting for an engineer to actually, you design the building and then you see how it actually works in the load. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how the, what the theory is. We also model this for the rebate. So we have a lot more information about how this building is theoretically going to operate. So those would be a very efficient building. I think it's like 35–40% below a comparable building. So I'm intrigued to get that information. I'm sure like that would love to share it with the committee to understand, what you bought this new building. How does it work compared to what you think you were bought and how much you're saving? That was one of the drivers for this building was, for a high performance building.
Right. So what I'd like to suggest is that we keep a forum with you and Paul and Tom Arcari, and then maybe set some goal lines in terms of when we're going to look at the history of the building as quickly as we can, as reasonably as we can, and then come to a conclusion of what we can step up to reach the town's interest and concern about continuing a business-like operation where he needs to do it. Then perhaps we can get some money from Eversource in that regard. I don't know, but
right. I mean, we already get quite a bit. Ironically, the Eversource guy lives in Newington and is watching the building. So when I reached out to him, before he got response to me back in in a couple hours, which is miraculous with Eversource in a COVID situation. So I'm optimistic they're going to be helpful.
Now, you had indicated some date in August. Is that what's going to be your first?
I think they read the meters the middle of the month, August 15th. So I think that should be a pretty good initial data point that we get. A couple days after that. So by late August, you should be in the building and pretty much fully operating. And we'll see the AC. And Tom is right. The big load is the worst case scenario is, and the heat pumps is the electric heat. But we'll see what they're drawing from the air conditioning, because heat pumps, it's not, there's a wattage on the unit, but they move the heat around. So they're much more efficient than what theoretically they draw. So I am intrigued to see, how efficient they are during the AC heating. And I'm sure we're going to get some hot days coming up in August based on what we've been having.
Okay, so am I understanding you correctly to say that it wouldn't be necessarily a decision where the town would have to reduce the air conditioning in the gym to gain other issues with lighting in various departments? It would be more how the kilowatts would be running, and if they're not at a certain max, they're making an adjustment in those areas. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I'd say let's see what we're actually drawing, and then we'll have a better handle on the reality of it.
So how often would you test those meters? Would it be
they read them once a month, and they give us the peak day, peak at half hour.
All right. So could I ask your indulgence, you and Tom, to work with Paul so that we're all on the same page, and any discussions would stay close to the town that way as we progress through this?
Sure, absolutely.
If it becomes a question of money, well, then we'll just have to find it. That's all.
Yeah.
The chairman, Councilor Minor, has a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Minor.
Thank you, sir. Just for Graham or Tom, on the VRF system, correct me if I'm wrong, that 415 kilowatts is on a dead start in a cold building. Am I correct in that? And as they modulate through, that load lowers as it goes? Am I correct in that or no?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
Okay.
the duration that you can run the generator with will be, less than this. This is like the startup.
Right. So my point being is, I understand, you have to calculate somehow, but in the reality of operation, if the building is operating, everything is drawing as it normally is, and ambient temperature is, let's say 65, 70 degrees, whatever that night might be, and there's a power outage, that the unit is not starting from a dead start sub-zero mode it already has ambient temperature that it's moving around. Am I oversimplifying that, or is that factually correct, Graham?
I think you're right, but I'd have to think about that one. But I think you're right. I mean, it is true that these loads the startup is much higher than the actual ambient. Whether the changeover it sees it again, I don't know. That's a question I have to ask my guy.
Yeah, because that was just my general understanding of the systems. I mean, I'm not well versed in it by any stretch, but my general limited knowledge to it was that was how the operation was. That as ambient temperature already existed, it lowered that initial startup draw and load, that you didn't need that demand. But piggybacking off to another subject was right from the beginning when, I was involved in this, there was never an intent for this building to be 100% operational on a generator. It's just not practical. Even hospitals don't have is not running at 100% generation of what it has for normal power consumption. So with that said, hopefully we do find a way to refine some of these areas that we can maybe bump them up a little bit more to be more user friendly in the event of an extended outage. But I think we're within the normal levels of what you would see in a quote unquote public building or municipal building. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely, yeah. This, especially one that was under financial budget pressure. You're absolutely right. This is, we never plan for fully operational buildings unless they're, formal shelters.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the real suggestion or not. I think it's just trying to find areas on the town's part. To be fair to the town, they're concerned about certain areas that have to maintain a business.
Yeah, understood. Operationally.
Like a bank would, just like a bank would. But I have one quick question, and I'll let Tom Arcari make his comment. So this 415 kilowatts on the VRF, that's at 100%? That's pushing the whole, that's the carry?
That's actually 70, that's like 70, actually 75%.
That's 75%.
Of the worst case scenario, yeah.
So if you felt through the control module that you could reduce that down below 75%, then you could feed some other area?
Yeah, potentially. That's one of the things we could look at.
Accurate?
And stage them, yeah.
Okay.
But this does reflect the 75%.
Right. Tom, did you?
I just had a question for Graham, actually, because I'm interested. If hypothetically, after testing and ambient air and dealing with all these things, we find that, let's say we have capacity of 100 kW or something, and that would basically pick up the rest of the lighting, and the air conditioning is a trade-off with the heating. My question is, would it be simpler electrically to just connect the generator switch panel to the main service, or is it simpler to add miscellaneous circuits to the generator feed?
I have to think about that, because you got the transfer switch. So it's a wiring thing.
Okay.
But it's an interesting thought.
We can talk about that after offline.
Yeah, what's the most cost-effective way to do it? Yeah.
Are there any other questions on that?
Okay. Mr. Chair, if I could just piggyback on what Tom was just talking about, that was my thought initially, that would be the most simplistic. If it's a lot, if you can physically make it happen, then that would make I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but that would be the easiest way of handling it. Correct, Graham? That you would basically just be switching that over at 100%.
Yeah, I believe so. I just got to make sure before I commit to that there's not a nuance that I'm missing here.
Right. You want to see the calculations. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the committee will appreciate and rely on you having those discussions with Paul in the future, and he with you, and hopefully we can come to some adjustment in these issues, or at least a strategy is what the committee would like to see, a strategy for approaching a resolution to the concerns. So we appreciate your time, Graham, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Congratulations on your TCO. That was a major milestone.
Thank you.
Great job by Downs to get this schedule.
Yeah, it was a high mountain to climb, but we got to the top. Nobody blew off the top either that I'm aware of. We took a head count. Chairman, maybe.
Mr. Chair, if you could indulge me one more before we lose Graham, because we don't get a chance to get him very often.
Yeah, the committee wants to start charging you. Go ahead.
The last thing is original considerations on the project were for photovoltaic for the gymnasium. And the question and conversation came up recently that we just were kicking it around of the opportunity of having an owned photovoltaic system with storage capacity. Have you ever done anything with any of those types of projects to have storage capacity in addition to the genset?
We've talked about it. We've never executed it, but I know it is a consideration. I mean, I think the plan was to provide PV, but buy it yourself. You weren't going to go through a PPA. I believe
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better if you have the money. It makes more sense to buy it yourself.
But have you ever done it in terms of having storage capacity for basically allowing for a buildup to cover basically a shortage of what we might be able to pull off with a generator? Have you ever looked at it from
I
that
personally
view?
have not, but I mean, we've done a ton of PV, but I'll have to ask my guy if it, if he's seen it happen. Theoretically, it's possible.
Graham,
I'd
can
just be
you,
curious. Okay.
Hey, we
Yeah.
gotta move on, gentlemen. We got a lot more to go through, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Graham, we've had some discussion about the storm and sanitary system.
Yep.
in The building, would you be able to address the capacity of that?
Yeah, I mean and I know I'm not that familiar with what happened the other day, but the permanent site storm is designed for a 10-year frequency event, which is standard practice in engineering. So once the final build out is done, it should be more than adequate for the project. Now I believe the temporary solution, I'm told that we had like about a 2.5-inch rain in like half an hour. Is that correct? I believe.
Correct. Yes.
So that, looking at the math, that works out to be like a 50-year intensity event. So for when you do a temporary solution, you're thinking, a much shorter duration. So I think that was, that's quote unquote unlikely to happen again. Now, if I think it would make sense to look at what's the current, obviously we're going to knock the building down and get it going as soon as we can. In the interim, it might make sense to look at some kind of like failure, provide tie into a catch basin so it allow the flow over the site rather than into the building if we had to. But then we can work out with Downs what's the best way to do that. And I assume that the schedule, whether they change their sequencing of the demolition to try to get the a larger temporary pipe. I don't know if that makes sense or it's even worth considering.
Well, they already did temporary as it currently is.
I don't want to keep a long conversation on this, so please keep your questions limited. Thank you.
So long story short, so 10 years, the permanent solutions, in my opinion, engineering practice. So if there's something phasing or sequencing you want to try to do, we can talk to Downs about what might make sense.
Okay, Mr. Minor had a question or a comment.
No, the only comment was they've already done that from the standpoint of diverting the main primary roof drains on about 70% of the building to dump out onto the surface to try to mitigate adding all that volume to the system that, kicked back, theoretically kicked backwards before.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Frank from Downs, do you have any comment on this in terms of an ability to resequence the demo to expedite the delivery of that new system? Frank?
Sorry, Joe.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly look into what our options are if there are any. Not saying that we have options right now, but certainly something we can look into further and see.
Because right now you have that happening when near the end of the demo and abatement, which would put us what, November or later?
October timeframe.
Yeah. Okay, because a number of committee members have expressed their concern to me that if it got beyond that, we could have an ice pond, given the temporary steps we had to take to reduce the water flow from the old building. So Anything you can do in that regard, we'd like to have you track because there's a deep concern about it. So,
Understood.
Mr. Arcuri, do you have any comment on that?
Just gonna say that the temporary situation we have now, I think, works well, and it's warm weather, so that preserves, adding surcharging to the existing storm. But I think life safety is something that can't be taken, for sort of granted, so to speak. So as the weather gets cooler, worst case scenario, we're going to have to reconnect to the temporary scenario we had in place prior, just so that we don't create a life safety issue on Mazzicoli Way. Hopefully we can phase the work in such a way that gets the permanent in sooner. But there are some challenges with that, in that even if we demo half the building and put that storm in place, the contractor, that would probably or potentially delay some of the demo work. And then to complete the demo work, the demo contractor would actually have to traverse that brand new equipment with heavy demo equipment. So I'm not sure what the solution is, but the life safety for all patrons on Mazzicoli will have to be preserved.
Okay, thank you. The next item is the anti-climb process. Tom, you want to touch some base on that issue in terms of what we could put to help discourage climbers in place?
We're still exploring it. I saw this product that was distributed to us today. I've never seen this before. Certainly this is something that can be installed at the top of the roof edge. I don't really know what it is. I would hate to install something that could potentially hurt somebody or harm somebody if they, let's say, put their hands up there and then cut their hands on it. I think there's a fear of a liability issue. But I would like to look into this product a little bit more before I committed to say, hey, let's go and do it. Other options would be to put a short roof screen around the perimeter of that area, or rails. Rails rails can be scaled as well. I don't have a great solution at this particular time, but I just saw this today and certainly we'll look into it.
Is that a hard rubber? Is that what that is?
Hey, Joe, it's Chris O'Neill.
Yes, Chris, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were
No problem. I'm here. Yeah, that product is the one I sent out earlier, Tom. That's what I was talking to Joe about utilizing. But that is like either a hard rubber or a hard plastic. And what they say in the product literature is that it shouldn't injure you. It's just going to make it uncomfortable to, attempt to get your hands up there and climb up there and kneel on it kind of thing. So it's not meant to draw blood or anything like that. Just make it more of an uncomfortable situation if you're trying to actually traverse it.
So essentially, in theory, it discourages that climbing on the roof, but if it's relatively safe, then that means that it would it's not entirely untraversable, meaning.
Right.
I have two participants with questions for Mr. O'Neill or Tom. I can't see who was first, James.
Councilor Minor was, and then Councilor Petracco.
Okay, I'm just going to give Councilor Pacheco a little time.
Oh, that's just your phone on there. Oh, I thought that was the whole screen there.
Because Mr. Minor is a gentleman, he's going to let Gail go first.
Thank you. I just have a question. Is this material just around the perimeter, or would you layer the whole roof with it, number one? And then what's estimated cost?
This is material that would go around the roof edge in the areas that are low, where it could potentially be mountable.
Right, but would it be that whole area or just around the wall?
I think just around the wall where you would get your hands up on top of it.
Okay. And the cost of this material?
Chris?
I have not gotten that far in my research yet. I'll look a little bit more into it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Minor.
Thank you, sir. Just a real quick comment. I personally, and this is a personal comment, and I'd be interested in anybody else's thoughts. To me, this is about safety first, but also aesthetics. That would resolve the safety issue for a quick jump up, but just, the temptation and the aesthetics of it, with having something like that being rubber, it might not be comfortable, but it by no means would prohibit anybody getting up there.
Mr. O'Neill, did you have any issue on that?
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. If they're determined to get up there, it might not be enough of a deterrent. I like Tom's idea of the roof screen. That was something I thought of as well. So this was kind of the alternative, lower cost option in my eyes. I think it's worth at least getting a sample of this if it's something we're thinking of pursuing, so you can at least kind of touch it and feel it and see how it works.
It all depends if it's an adult climbing or a kid. The kid will probably feel it once and be done, but you never know. There are a lot of big adult kids out there. Any other comments on that? I just want to say I thank the design team for getting on top of that, because that's a concern I know of the town managers as well as the council as a whole. The climbing issue that was raised by Mr. Minor, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we want to address this as quickly and as economically and as attractive and as safe, I guess, all the way around, but prevents people from getting up there and doing a lot of damage, not only to the product we've all spent so much time on, but to themselves when they fall off. So thank you again for that. Okay, is Graham still with us, or? Get off. Okay.
No, I don't see him on the
Okay.
meeting any longer.
All right. So Tom, we appreciate that. And if you would kind of take the lead to make certain that Paul is tied in so that there's no misunderstandings in any discussions or any differences of opinion, that's fine. But the committee would greatly appreciate some strategies to make the town more comfortable with the situation if possible. Okay, so thank you. And we'd like to set some timeline on that, if you can think that over, of when we talk about this again and when the town would be gradually stepping up to where they feel they need to be. And to try to do that sooner rather than later based on meter readings, or as you said, we might have to go into the winter on some of this stuff to do the test.
Understood.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Councilor Minor, you have your hand up. Did you still have a question?
No, sorry, for whatever reason, it doesn't want me to lower it.
I'll take care of that.
Okay, any other business pertinent to the committee?
I have nothing.
Okay. Public participation. Any member of the public wishing to ask us a question or make a comment, please state your name and address.
We have one individual. Barbara is on. I know sometimes she does have difficulty in having the system work for her. If you'd like, I'll unmute her and just confirm that she doesn't want to speak.
All right, thank you.
You there, Barbara? I think she's having the same problem she's had before.
Okay,
I do show her microphone is open, but I'm not hearing anything.
all right. Well, we wish Barbara the best for certain.
Councilor Bedrico has her hand raised.
Gail, go ahead, please.
And just a quick question. You're starting the abatement rather quickly, the preparation. I know you can't be foretell the future, but how soon do you think you'd be able to anticipate if there's going to be major issues?
Frank?
Well, I certainly hope we don't run into major issues, obviously. I will say that when the original budget was put in place, there are a certain number of allowances in place to deal with certain unforeseen conditions. We don't have a significant amount of allowances, but we do have some built in to deal with any little surprises that may pop up along the way. We won't really know what we're getting into until we get into some of the demo. You know, it's really hard to say. I don't have a crystal ball, but you know, the next 6 to 8 weeks will be we'll have a better understanding of what we're dealing with.
And is the actual demolition, I'm sorry to ask this, going to be like wrecking ball or piece by piece or I mean, how, just a brief.
Frank?
Yeah, so so once we get through abatement, there's going to be some, what I'm going to call like almost like a surgical removal, right? We do have to divorce the old town hall from the police department. So there's going to be some saw cutting to separate the two structures. And then there will be some, you know, some wrecking, not a wrecking ball per se, but there will be equipment, for lack of a better terminology, just basically munching up the parts and pieces of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Comments by committee members? Okay, well, we all took the tour, the committee took the tour, the council took the tour, and I sense a new energy on the part of the public about the whole facility. And many people are excited to bring their kids into the community center and take advantage of the multiple programs in the expanded areas as soon as we can get by this this lousy virus. So there's a lot of potential in the future and optimism. And that's what we have to hold on to during these tough times as we move forward. It's going to be all good in days to come. I'm confident of that. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Don Woods.
Heard your voice in this.
Any discussion?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.